Hey everyone, this is Bo. In this video, I set out to build what was inside this crate. I should say what is inside this crate. It's not past tense, it's still in there. Unfortunately, I did not record the intro video after I was finished with the bench, which is in here, and crating it up. So you're seeing this intro of the crate, which I also make in this video. And so stay tuned and watch how I build them both. So here's a rough plan of the bench. You can see it's got about 54 inches long, 14 inches high, and about 18 inches deep, with one step on the end for a small dog to jump onto and get onto the bench, and then get onto a bed. Alright, so on this little bench here, I've been making quite a bit of progress. Gotten the plywood processed and all cut down. I then glued on some hardwood edging to the legs, the top and bottom of each leg. And then I turned my attention to cutting joinery. So I cut dado in each leg, a rabbit in each leg on the top, and then dados on the upper and lower shelf pieces here. I was then able to do a dry fit and measure for these internal dividers, and got those cut and sized and fit into place, and now it's at another state of dry fit where it's clamped up. And now I'm going to turn my attention to the face frame. There's going to be a face frame on the front and the back of this, so I'm just going to lay it out on one side, just no measurements, just laying the pieces on top of it, and then I'll just duplicate them for the back. Now that the cabinet pieces have had the exterior and interior surfaces primed and sanded, I then put a coat of top coat paint on just the internal surfaces and not the external. The external, during glue up and attaching the face frame and sanding and flushing up, it's going to get dinged and marked and messed up again, so there's no sense in top coating the outside. The only reason there's primer on the external surface is just due to moisture. Wanted to make sure that both sides were primed so moisture doesn't come in one end that's unfinished and turn all these plywood pieces into baked potato chips and make the glue up very difficult. So now that's done, I'm turning my attention to making the face frame. So in the previous step, before I did the priming and painting of the carcass, I did cut all these pieces to length, and now here I'm laying them out to mark them for joinery, which, as you can see, I'll be using the domino and loose tenons to join these together. After I get everything marked, I then disassemble it and cut all the mortises, and then it's time for the glue up. The glue up was pretty uneventful. And after these face frames came out of the clamps, it was time to flush them up using the Bricka drum sander. After removing the masking tape and doing a couple dry runs here, I'm ready
actually glue up the top part of the bench. You can see I'm elevating on 2x4 so I get some clamps underneath there and using some cawls across the top to distribute the clamping pressure. Checking for square, and then finally I glue on the legs with the long pipe clamps. After that glue up dried, I sanded and flushed up all the joints, as you can see from some of the raw wood here facing us. It's now time to glue on the face frames. So I started on one side, just using some 23 gauge pin nails to hold it in place while I flipped it over so I could do the other side. And then once that was positioned, some more pin nails. And then I think I get out pretty much every clamp I had in my shop to clamp the face frames to the cabinet. And now we're flushing up the face frame with the top of the bench here using the little lipper attachment for my trim router, which actually works pretty good. And now I'm adding a chamfer to the inside edges. So the video is not chronologically correct because you can still see some face frames in the clamps, but now I'm turning my attention to the step that's going to attach to the side of the bench. I'm starting on the what would be the long rails that run from top to bottom, and I'm cutting a large rabbet in them. And now I'm cutting the dado for the step itself using the miter gauge. And so I cut that dado kind of wild, and now here I am going to be measuring from that dado both directions, first measuring up to cut it to the desired distance from the top of the bench, and then later I'll come back, do the same kind of mock-up on the bench and mark where it has to hit the ground. So here I am mocking it up on the side of the bench, trying to hold it together with some clamps so I can get the exact height so that stair drops down, hits the ground at the right angle. Transferring that angle back to the supports here, and there it goes. And looks pretty good. Next up, we'll be cutting the plywood backer that goes on the very back of the step here. And so I've got some hardwood edging already glued on, and now I'm cutting it to the same angle that meets the ground and the top of the bench, which I believe in this case is 30 degrees. And here I'm cutting the step itself with that 30-degree angle. And this may not make much sense, but I'm cutting that plywood backer piece down in two separate pieces, which seems pretty silly, but you'll see here during the glue up that these kind of sandwich the stair, or I should say the tread of the stair. after cutting the hinge to length and laying it out, I'm now laying out and cutting in the joinery marks for the hinge to be mortised in the stair. Setting the depth of my trim router using the actual hinge, and after some fiddling around here and getting that height set right, it's time to remove some wood.
Alright, so the bench is finally in good shape here. I did make a mistake on one of the face frames. Had to basically trash that one. And I also made a couple trial and errors here on these angled step pieces. For some reason I could not cut the dado to the right width and kept making it too big. So anyway, it's finally fit nice with the step. That's all glued up, looking great. All been shaped, sanded, ready for paint. So some of the internals did get glue on them that I had to scrape off, which then damaged the paint that I already had on there. So I'm going to have to hit them with primer again, as well as a little bit of top coat. And that's really the next step here, get primer on all the untreated surfaces, and then we'll move on to paint. Here we go. Alright, I just did a really good discussion, but didn't have the the camera recording. So I'm going to try it again. So what you see here is the bench is done, completed behind me. One thing I have to do is attach the step, which I'm not going to do, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But I didn't record much of the painting process. Frankly, it's been a little hectic in the house, and finishing is kind of a stressful situation in general for me with paint. Just trying to get a really nice finish is always a little nerve-wracking. But got a coat of primer that was tinted. That got sanded down at 320. It then got a top coat. And I did mask off the internals since those were already painted, so I masked those off with tape and plastic and just sprayed the externals. And so after that first coat of paint, I didn't thin it enough, and it was pretty splattery is a good word. And so I had to be sanded down quite a bit to get that nice and flat. And then I thinned the second coat quite a bit more, sprayed that sprayed really nicely. I was a little heavy-handed in a couple areas and had a couple sags I had to clean up, so those got cleaned up and touched up with some paint. But at this stage, it is done. There's nothing more to do to it, like I said, other than attach a step. And the reason the step's not getting attached right now is because this has to get shipped in a crate, and so there's no sense in having the step on there when I can store it kind of underneath the bench in the crate. So that's what's up next, is making a crate for this. And so what I've found, what my plan anyway, is to make a plywood crate and then wrap this completely in bubble wrap. And so I bought some bubble wrap here behind, you can't see it. Some bubble wrap back here, a big roll of it. I plan to wrap it in bubble wrap. I think 4 rolls total is about 5/16 of an inch of thickness. 5/16. So my plan is to wrap the whole thing in bubble wrap, build this crate around that compresses that bubble wrap a little bit, that stops this from moving inside the crate, And then probably add some other some plastic straps over top that bubble wrap too to keep it down. And the same with the step. I'll put that underneath here, strap that down, make sure that's not moving, but it's fully concealed in bubble wrap. So yeah, using that 5/16 inch for the bubble wrap, that's how I'm laying out the internals of my crate for the dimensions. And so next up, I'm going to start ripping some plywood and getting this crate built. So here we go. All those strips of plywood I was cutting into little pieces here will be the risers for the crate. Basically the skid part of it that gets enough clearance between the ground and the crate for a pallet jack or a forklift to get into. And so those have all been glued and stapled together, and now I am attaching them to the base of the crate with some glue and some 3.5 inch long screws. And as you'll see, I'll come back and put some, I don't know what you want to call them, the skid pieces on the very bottom. Those also get glued and a couple 3.5 inch screws, or maybe just one actually, driven from the top down. So there's basically screws running up and down through those risers to keep them nice and rigid. Next up here is making the crate sides. And so what you see me doing here is laying out some lines for the thickness of the plywood and the thickness of the 1x4 material I have. And the reason I'm doing that is that the sides will overlap the bottom, and that's the bottom is a double piece of plywood, so there's a larger overhang of that 1x4 on the bottom. And they also overlap the sides a little bit, so that's why you see the 1x4 extending past the plywood, and just so kind of everything nests together in their own little, I don't know, basically like rabbits, I suppose. Now I'm cutting the vertical pieces and screwing everything into place from the back with some 1.25 inch screws. So you can see that joinery now here. There's the plywood piece, and there's the rabbit, and it kind of just nests in there. The plywood sits on the other plywood, and the 1x4 nests inside the other 1x4. I wish I would have taken a better video of this and explained it in an actual video, but this is the best I can do here. Now the crate's all done, the top's installed. It also nests inside the side pieces, and now I'm weighing the overall mass of the crate to get ready for shipment. Crate weighed 99 pounds, I believe. And so here I'm showing that joint for the lid, so it kind of just locks into place. I just add a handful of screws to hold that down. Now, taking out the front so I can load all the stuff into it. But before I do that, here are some finished pictures of the bench. Overall, it turned out really nice. All right, let's load it up. There's the step all strapped down. Got some plywood to help support it and some plastic straps. Bubble wrapped bench. And here I'm going to try to stick it in there. Nice and snug fit like I wanted. And I got a piece of plastic over top of there too, so if it gets wet or any rain, hopefully it
sits on top of that plastic and kind of runs off the sides to the crate. I installed the side back on there, screwed that into place, and then put the top on. And we're all done, ready to ship this bad boy. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.